So glad you could be with us today. It's you never know what's going to happen on a holiday or something special around here. Somebody may be off at another church, but then other people from other churches come to visit us, and we are really, really pleased to see you. It is kind of strange in a way to be speaking to you on the first Sabbath of a new millennium. I don't know if I've really got my mind around it yet. I wish all of you a happy 1,000 years ahead, and trust that God will lead you on your way for as much of that 1,000 years as you get to enjoy. But it does seem strange. The truth is, of course, that really intrinsically it doesn't mean a thing. It's no more than the odometer turning on your car. It's no more than tearing off a page on your calendar. It's an arbitrary date. It was wrong in its inception. It was supposed to be originally the birth of Christ, based upon the birth of Christ, but that was wrong on the wrong date by at least 4 years. And so on it goes. After that period of time, it's become nowadays, by the way, I don't know if you know this or not, but it is no longer BC, meaning before Christ, and AD, meaning the year of our Lord. It is now BC, meaning before the common, or BCE, which means before the common era, and CE, which means the common era. And that basically means that what we've all agreed, finally, worldwide, would be the changeover, or would be the common calendar that we all use. And it's striking. The thing that some people have mentioned to me that I had not thought about was a realization that the Chinese have their own calendar. But last night in Beijing, they were celebrating the year 2000 at midnight, just like the rest of the world was. It was really an incredible example of one small way in which the entire world is unified on something. And I was really struck by that. We've been living with these numbers so long that the date really has become highly significant. And you can forget about all the ideas of errors. You can forget about the fact that the millennium doesn't really begin until next January. That is, the next millennium doesn't. As far as the world is concerned, it started today with the rollover of the calendar to that 2 and 000. We've been living with these numbers, as I say, so long they've become quite an icon in our minds. And this whole thing this year was underlined in an odd way by the icon of our age, which is the computer. It was an odd drama, in fact, that played out over the last little over a year, I guess, that the whole question has been raised and worked on. That the great boon of our time, the great tool that has increased our productivity like nothing has done in history, that's really made us very rich people, actually threatened to bring the whole thing down around our ears just because some programmers made a decision years ago to use 2 digits for the date instead of 4. Just a small decision. And so the drama, the metaphor that we've seen over the past year is we have this marvelous tool. It's given us all this great wealth. It's built us up in this great way. And because we made one small, it wasn't even really a mistake. It was just a decision that was made. It threatened to bring the whole thing down around our ears. It's man's metaphor for God. The computer giveth, and the computer taketh away. And if he takes it away, if you don't get every jot and every tittle exactly correct. I think a lot of people look at God that way. But the computer is nothing like God, and I think man consistently underestimates the power of life and the power of the creation of God to right itself, to control itself, to keep itself moving forward. I did last night, like probably some of you did, my primary Y2K compliance test. I turned off the computer and went to bed. The sun came up this morning, which means that the world is Y2K compliant, and I can see that all of you are Y2K compliant. Your bodies are working, albeit maybe not very well since you were up too late last night, but nevertheless, you're here. And I am so thankful that God made life so resilient, that He made us as human beings so resourceful, and that we have the capacity for spotting problems, working with problems, overcoming problems, struggling with problems, and we've done it, We made a monster for ourselves. It could have been a real headache, and we saw what we'd done. We went back and corrected it, and everybody overcame it, which, frankly, I really thought they would. If you followed the New Year celebration around the world, you looked at all the celebrations that started actually yesterday morning at 5 o'clock, I understand, when they finally first began what was taking place. You may have followed it all around. You may have wondered not only that the computer did not bring down civilization, the computer was on its best behavior. It was like a little boy, They scrubbed his ears and scrubbed his face and made him sit in a chair and put his clothes on and said, you sit there and you behave yourself. Everybody is watching you. And it was almost as though the normal failures were cut about in half, because computers are always going down for one thing or another. Computers are always getting something wrong. They're just dumb machines. But over the last 24 hours, they all seem to have been on their absolutely best behavior. Man at his best is a remarkable creature, and even man seemed to be on his best behavior last night. As it went around the world, the goodwill that was shown, the willingness to communicate, the hugging and kissing that goes on at midnight, is really a wonderful time. And you know, I couldn't help but think last night as I watched all this going on, that all the terrorists running around last week with their blasting caps and their nitroglycerin were never ever have looked more futile, sillier, than they did just this last week. For indeed, here is the entirety of the world celebrating a marvelous time in our history. And these guys, all they could think about was going around and blowing up something. They can kill a few people, but terrorists are not God either. They are exposed last week for the petty criminals and thugs that they really are. But as this bizarre Y2K dance wound down to a close, it was interesting to watch that some Christian leaders played their hand very badly in the last year. I think they made a very serious error in the way they handled it. They cried wolf. Now, you know, it's one thing for computer people who understand the machines, program the machines, work with them all the time, to tell us we have a problem. This is what we need to do to fix this problem. We're going to go to work and we're going to try to have it ready before the turn of the century. That's one thing. But then there are the opportunists, and funny, so many of them were religious opportunists. I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal. I thought that was a very useful piece of information. It was a little short article, wasn't even on page 1, but it was about how to recognize what's going on with the Y2K question, how to evaluate what you're hearing. And he had a very simple formula. It was follow the money. You take a look at the money that's involved in it. What is the person, is the person who is getting excited about Y2K, beating the Y2K drum, what's he selling? Is he pandering a book? Does he have some kind of fixes that he's trying to sell? And I began to notice, as I followed this thing, the pattern was very clear. The pattern that distressed me the most, though, was the opportunism of preachers who were getting into the act, who decided that this was a chance for them to wave a flag or beat a drum and generate support or generate interest or call attention to themselves or generate income or whatever it was they were doing with the thing. When I was asked about it, as I was several times last year, when I would go out and I would hold an interactive session with an audience and I would say, what questions do you have? On one or two occasions, someone would say, what do you think about the Y2K problem? And my response was, I'm sorry, I am a teacher of the Bible. I am not an expert on computers. If you want to know about the Y2K problem, I would suggest you talk to someone who is deeply involved in the profession of data processing and ask them about that problem. But I will tell you privately, I have always felt all along and I've told people privately this, that I frankly thought it was going to be the biggest non-story of the turn of the century, which indeed it seems to be turning out to be precisely that. Others, though, saw it as a megaphone to get attention, and then they've had to back down with egg all over their faces. Now, here's the problem with this, is that the next time that they see something coming, the next time that they see something that's really critical or important, the next time they have to speak with authority to the public about what's happening in the world, nobody will listen to a word they say. It's why I think it's so critical that those of us who teach the Bible stick with what we know, that we stick with the Bible, and we talk about biblical principles. Because the thing that struck me from the very beginning is, with the knowledge of what the Bible says about man, the thing that's going to bring man to his knees, the thing that's going to cripple us finally and bring us down to our knees and on our faces before God, is not going to be some two-digit mistake programmers made with our computers. It's going to be issues much larger and much bigger than that. I think, for example, the computer problems have been fixed. I thought quite sure they would be. My question, though, is how in the world are we going to fix the moral rot that is still eating away at the bowels of this country? How are we going to fix that? If only we could spend a few $1 million, and send some computer experts back into the back rooms to work on lines of programming. If only we could fix it like a machine, it'd be wonderful. But the problem with it is there just isn't any way to get your hand on it. The goodwill you saw last night is real. And frankly, I think it's stupid to take a pessimistic view of the world and confuse that with prophecy. And I feel that an awful lot of people do precisely that. They just look at the negative, they look at the bad side, they look at negative, the pessimism, and they think that, well, prophecy is pessimistic, so I'll be pessimistic. Fact is, the prophets don't come along very often and give us a pat on the back and tell us what a wonderful job we're doing. Do they? You look through the pages of the Bible, they very rarely have anything to say when everything's going great. Why in the world should God give us a pat on the back and a well done, son, if all we're doing is doing what's required of us and just living our lives according to the law and living according to His Word and His instructions? Why do we need a pat on the back for that? The prophets only begin to speak when things are going bad. And we confuse that, I think, in our own minds sometimes with a pessimistic view. And I'm really puzzled over the last year at what almost looked to me like, as we approached the end of the year, a disappointment that some people had because there wasn't going to be a big crisis. It's almost as though they were disappointed that they wouldn't be dragging their Denny Moore beef stew out of the closet and getting to eat it on January the 1st or January the 30th or whenever it was it finally came around. It's almost they were disappointed that they weren't going to be going down to the lake and pulling up a bucket of water and carrying it back to the house. Almost as though they kind of wished that type of thing would happen. I don't understand it. I've thought about that a lot and really wonder why it would be. But the goodwill you saw last night was real. It wasn't fake. The good that people do during the Christmas season, it's good. It's real. It's not a fake. The good that people are doing every day in our society, of people who are volunteering to help. You go down to the hospital. If you're in the hospital for some period of time for surgery, some of the people who come in and out of your room are going to be volunteers who aren't paid a dime for the things they do. They are good people doing good works. And they're out there all the time, and it is stupid. If you're going to be a prophet, if you're going to try to pretend to apply the Bible to the modern world, not to recognize the good in the world along with the things that were bad. Even Jeremiah, whose name is given to the word Jeremiad, which is a prolonged lament, even Jeremiah saw the kingdom of God out there. Even Jeremiah knew that there was a better world that was to come. But on the other hand, it's just as stupid to be a cockeyed optimist when, for all you know, your sweet little teenage daughter, the little girl that crawled up in your lap when she's a little bitty thing and gave her little kisses on your cheek and that you read stories to and that had to be hugged and that you prayed with every night. For all you know, that little 16, 17-year-old girl last week was down at a local VD clinic getting treatment for syphilis. It's happening all the time in school systems across the country, everywhere you turn. And when you begin to examine in depth the moral character and the moral development of the generation that's coming up right now, I watched this Frontline program, The Lost Children of Rockdale County. I'm going to look at it again because it shocked me so deeply and so profoundly. This was a school with sex education, a good program, but the program that taught abstinence, and they had condoms, free condoms available for everybody all over the place. And I watched the program. And I thought to myself, I really believe that the schools in my generation, when I was coming up through school, and we're talking now about the 40s, that we did a better job of sex education then than they do now. You didn't know we had sex education? Oh, sure we did. We learned about it from one another, right? I mean, most of us learn most of what we know as older generation people from kids our own age. And we did a better job, I guess, of sex education if you look at the bottom line. The number of cases of sexually transmitted disease, the number of illegitimate children being born. If you start looking at these things, we must have done a better job because the results were better. But that's another story for another day. Is there a case for a balanced view? And where are you going to go to find a balanced view of the world, where you can, a view which will allow you to see the good that you saw last night and recognize it as good, at the same time that will allow you to look at the other side of the coin and realize how corrupt some parts of our society are becoming and how rapidly they are headed that way? Well, as a teacher of the Bible, the only place I know to go for such a view is the Bible, and I have found over the years that as people immerse themselves in the Bible, as they internalize the Bible, as the Bible becomes the guide to their conscience, as the Bible becomes the informer of their intuition, that people who are well versed in the Bible often are able to find a much more balanced view. Sometimes, if they can just avoid getting the help of some preachers, they can wind up with even a better balanced view, but that's another subject too for another day. I'd like for us for a little while this afternoon to immerse ourselves in a section of Isaiah. and hear how a man of God addressed a group of people just like us. A group of people whose technology wouldn't have been a patch on ours, but it was up to stuff for the day and for the time. He was addressing a people who were wealthy, whose economy was so rich and so full that it was almost beyond description of anybody at the time. They were at the peak of their power. They were at the peak of their wealth. And at the same time, there were a lot of things in the moral infrastructure, if I may use that word, that were going very bad at the same time. I want to take you, if I can, to the 55th chapter of the book of Isaiah. These people are so much like us that it's tempting to say that they are us. The prophecy was actually directed at the end time. And in fact, it was directed at the people whom Isaiah saw every day and addressed every day. Make no mistake about that. But at the same time, there are interlaced in this prophecy suggestions that it is indeed addressed at the end time to a people exactly like the people to whom Isaiah was speaking. And it begins, oddly enough, with this particular passage does, with the words of Jesus. It's a little short section cited over in the book of John, I believe the 7th chapter, where on the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles, Jesus stood up in the temple and with a very loud voice cried out so everyone could hear him, "Ho! Everyone that thirsts, come to the waters. He that has no money, come ye buy and eat. Yea, come and buy wine and milk without money and without price." Now, I don't know how much Jesus had to say on that day. I do know that the people to whom these words were spoken in the temple were familiar with them, for they heard these scriptures read all the time. And these were people who memorized scriptures and therefore could have even finished, in many cases, the quotation that Jesus gave them. What was Jesus talking about on this occasion when he cried out to these people, "Ho, everyone that thirsts, come to the waters. He that has no money, come and buy and eat. Yea, come and buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread? Why do you spend your labor for things that don't satisfy? They don't give you any joy, not any real satisfaction." He says, "Hearken diligently to me. Eat what's good. Let your soul delight itself in fatness. Incline your ear. Come to me. Listen, and your soul shall live." Now, mind you, Isaiah is some of the finest poetry you will ever read. And so consequently, if you try to take the Western approach, I forget who it was that said it right now, I think it's Brad Young, that the Western mind explains everything and understands nothing. That you can over-explain these scriptures and you try to, well, milk means this and bread means that, and forget it. Just take it, take the imagery, take it as it comes to you, and try to grasp what he is saying. Because the wine, the milk, the real satisfaction he's talking about comes right here when he says, "Incline your ear." In other words, tilt your head, turn your ear toward me, and listen carefully to what I am about to say. "I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David. Behold, I have given him for a witness to the people, a leader and a commander to the people. Behold, you shall call a nation." But before I go on, let me stop just a moment. David was dead by this time, wasn't he? Yeah, long dead. Now, when he says this, of course, the reader would probably think, well, he means the house of David, and therefore whoever it was that was sitting on the throne of Israel at that time, of Judah, was David in that sense. But it was the sure mercies of David, and it was the witness of David. He said, this is what's going to happen. Now, a Christian reading this, going back now in time, would understand that Jesus, as the son of David, is the one who ultimately fulfilled that. And of course, Jesus stood up in the temple and says, come to the waters, come to me. On several occasions, he said, "Come to me, you who are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest." He said, "Take my yoke upon you." That he is the one who was to come with these mercies. He said, "Behold, you shall call a nation that you do not know. Nations that knew you not shall run to you because of the Lord your God, for the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you." Many people looking back at that, I remember one scholar made the statement that he did not believe that Isaiah wrote this because he felt that the conversion of the Gentiles was beyond the horizons of a prophet in this time. That Isaiah could not possibly have seen. I mean, this of course begs the question. Because the question is not what did Isaiah think? What did Isaiah see? It was what did the Lord reveal to Isaiah? And what is clear when you read the scriptures carefully and attentively is that all the way back in the law of Moses, that the stranger was welcome in God's house. That the stranger could come to the temple. that the Gentile could step right up there, and God says, he says to Israel, the stranger wants to come and worship me, as you do, so shall he do. The idea of putting up a wall in the temple that forbade Gentiles to cross and to come on in was strictly man's idea, not God's. The idea of the conversion of the heathen, or the conversion of the Gentiles, or the reaching out to the nations, is as old as God, because it was his intent to be ultimately the God of all people, not merely the God of Israel. Then comes this magnificent passage. It's one of the great passages in the English language in the King James Bible. It was borrowed and put in the Messiah. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. And let him return to the Lord, and he will have mercy upon him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. What in the world could you ever read that would be more New Testament than that? Come, seek the Lord while he may be found. You read that, and one of the things it underlines for me, it makes me think about, is the fact that there's that the word while, which implies that the opportunity to come to God is not necessarily open-ended at all times for a man. That there is a window of opportunity. There is a time in which a man can reach out and touch God. There's a time when a man can incline his ear and hear what God has to say. And when that time is past, he doesn't get that chance again. Let the wicked forsake his way. Repent. The unrighteous man his thoughts. And let him return to the Lord, and he will have mercy and will abundantly pardon. And God goes on to say, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. The realization of that simple truth should, you would think, prevent us from trying to impose our thoughts upon God, from trying to preach God our way, from trying to make God say the things that we want him to say. The humility that should come to us that says, my thoughts are not God's thoughts. I can give you my best, but I have to take you back to the Bible. I have to realize that I'm not the source of this. I'm not the one who can explain God. Only God can really reveal himself. For as the rain comes down, the snow from heaven, and doesn't return, but waters the earth and makes it bring forth and bud, that it may give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out of my mouth. It shall not return to me void. It shall accomplish that which I please, and shall prosper into what I send it. I live every day of my life in the faith of that Scripture, where God says, my word will not return to me void. For the work that I do, the ministry that I have, that I believe that God has placed in my hands and gifted me to do, is a ministry of the Word. It's a ministry of presenting the Word of God to the world and trying to get the world to think about it. Not necessarily to adopt my point of view, not necessarily to accept my arguments. I want people to think. And sometimes in the process of presenting it, I need to give them something they haven't thought about before. Sometimes I need to be provocative. Sometimes I need to jerk a chain and make people think about things they've never thought of before. But in the end, if you've noticed the Born to Win radio program, it's the Bible. The Bible, and then we go back to some more Bible when all is said and done. For in all that I can understand of God, and all I can understand of the commission that God gives to us, this little passage right here, my word will not return to me void. You put my word out there, and it will come back and bear fruit. I have absolute faith in that. There is this other passage, I won't turn to it, in Jeremiah the 23rd chapter, which always strikes me, where God speaks of false prophets, in rather unpleasant and uncomfortable term for the false prophet. But in the process, he talks about prophets that he never spoke to, never had a word to say to them. He said, I didn't speak to these prophets, but they ran. Basically what he means is they went out with a message I never gave them. I didn't speak to them. I wouldn't talk to them. I wouldn't have anything to do with them. And then he says this, but if they, false prophets, had caused my people to hear my word, they would have turned them away from their evil ways and the evil of their doings. People are so prone to look at preachers and Bible teachers and what have you and evaluate the message in terms of the man. The fact is, and say, well, is God using this man? Did God speak through this man? Whereas the truth is, if you will simply look to the Bible, If the man causes you to hear God's word, to pay careful attention to God's word, even a false prophet can turn you away from evil and save your life. That's what Jeremiah says. And here, Isaiah says, my word that goes out of my mouth will not return to me without accomplishing what I sent it out there to do. So I trust that if I will be faithful in presenting the Word of God, if I will be careful in presenting it, if I be diligent in presenting the Word of God to the world at large, it'll work. That it will bear fruit. It will come back. He then goes on to say, for you shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth before you into singing. All the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Instead of the thorn shall come up the fir tree. Instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle tree. And it shall be to the Lord for a name and an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. Now, this is what I was talking about balance. On the one hand, you have an evil and a corrupt society, a society that's turned its back on God. And yet at the same time, he says, now, if you will just listen to me, if you just tilt your head over, lift your ear this way, listen to what I've got to tell you. If the wicked man will forsake his thinking, the way his line of thought, if you will repent of the bad things that you have done, and if you will just turn to me, I'll have mercy, I'll abundantly pardon, and life will be good again. Things will work. Your computers won't crash. Your crops will grow. Stuff will work for you if you'll just do what I want you to do. You won't have thorns. You'll have a myrtle tree. Thus saith the Lord, keep your judgment and do justice, for my salvation is near to come and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man that does this. Blessed is the Son of Man that lays hold on it, that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it, that keeps his hand from doing any evil. And don't let the son of the stranger that has joined himself to the Lord speak, saying, well, the Lord has separated me from his people. Here we are back again to this theme. It comes up again and again in Isaiah. Listen to what he said. The son of the stranger who has joined himself to the Lord speak. Don't let him say this. Don't let him say, the Lord has separated me from his people. And in fact, right there in the first century, there were Gentiles who would have said precisely that. The Lord has separated me from his people. Because it's not right for me as a Gentile to eat with Jews. It's not lawful, as Peter told Cornelius, for me who am a Jew to eat with you who are a Gentile. Where did this come from? It didn't come from the law. It wasn't in the written law. The only place it could possibly have been was in the oral law and the traditions of the Jews. And so here, in a prophet speaking long before any of this says this, he said, don't let them say this. Don't let them say they're separated from me. Neither let the eunuch say, I'm a dry tree. For thus saith the Lord to the eunuchs that keep my Sabbath and choose the things that please me and lay hold on my covenant. They reach out, according to what he says here, the Gentile, the eunuch, whoever, may actually reach out and grasp the covenant of God. Even to them will I give in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than that of sons and daughters. I'll give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Who? Who is this that's going to get an everlasting name? We've got overtones here of eternal life. Who are going to get this? Jews? Israelites? No, they have them too. But this is talking about the stranger. This is talking about the eunuch. It's talking about people that had, for all intents and purposes, appeared to be cut off from God. And God says, no way. The sons of the strangers that join themselves to the Lord to serve him. Verse 6. To love the name of the Lord, to be his servants. Everyone that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it takes hold of my covenant. Even them will I bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices. Whose? The strangers. Accepted upon my altar. For my house shall be a house of prayer for all people. I still to this day, I shake my head and I wonder how on earth did this concept get lost? Because I get involved with arguments with people to this day who seem to believe that in the Old Testament, Gentiles had no access to God whatsoever. They were just cut off. They were gone. Only in the New Covenant could Gentiles have access to God. I guess they never read Isaiah. Or if they didn't understand what it was that they were reading. Must not have ever read the law. Because the law made provision for Gentiles to offer burnt offerings and sacrifices. He said to Moses and the Israelites, as you do, so shall they do. They can go into the temple side by side and offer offerings there. The Lord God, which gathers the outcasts of Israel, says, Yet I will gather others to him besides those that are gathered. In other words, I've got this group gathered together. I'm going to go out and gather some more. Who said something like this? Jesus. Other sheep I have that are not of this fold. I don't have them all in one place. I've got them elsewhere. But the thing that I think is so clear, both Old Testament and New Testament, is that God intended to be the God of all people. And his house was to be a house of prayer for all people. Not just for the Jews. Not just for one category of people. And all the way down to the book of Ephesians, here's Paul fighting with this idea that there are two classes of Christians in the New Testament church. Jewish and Gentile. He says, no, we do not recognize that kind of a division. It has never been that way. God never intended for it to be that way. And it isn't going to be that way now. He says then about these things, all you beasts of the field come to devour. Yea, all you beasts of the field. On the one hand, the hope, the reaching out to the Gentiles, the salvation of the Gentiles, the looking forward to a good world, the forgiveness of God, the mercy of God, all this is held out. And then there's this. All you beasts of the field come to devour. All you beasts of the field. His watchmen are blind. They are all ignorant. They are dumb dogs. They can't bark. They sleep. They lie down. They love to slumber. And if they ever do get up and bark, they're barking at the wrong thing. It's the funniest thing that he chooses this analogy here, because anybody who's got dogs knows how true it is. They'll lick a burglar in the face and bark at your friends. It's a funny thing. So the analogy comes home. They are dumb dogs. And dogs aren't very smart. Ask any cat owner. They cannot bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber. And then he says this very unfortunate thing. They are all greedy dogs, which can never have enough. Then he steps over in his analogy a little further, and he says they are shepherds that cannot understand. They look to their own way, every one for his gain from his quarter. When he uses the word shepherds, he gets very painfully close to home. Because biblically, when you start talking about shepherds and sheep are God's people. The shepherds are the ministry in one category or another. In the Old Testament, it might have been the priesthood. It might have been the prophets. It might have been the sons of Aaron. Whatever it is, the imagery is that of a shepherd supposedly taking care of the sheep that he has been assigned to take care of. And here, he says they are all greedy dogs. You know, you have shepherds who really care about the sheep, and you have sheepdogs who, well, you know, they like to bark. This greedy thing, though, comes in as very uncomfortable. Because, in fact, I think what oftentimes happens, and I remember when I did my book on religious fundraising, which is an unpublished manuscript, but it is finished. I learned something very interesting as I made my way through this book. I saw men who had, in the origins of their ministry, been small, been humble, hard-working evangelists. They would hold their meetings out in tents. They would hold people's hands. They would counsel with widows. They would do whatever they had to do. And as time went by and as their ministry became more and more successful, that when it came down to the end of it, what they wound up ultimately being involved in was no longer ministry. It was fundraising. That from the time they come to work on a Monday morning till the time they go home on Friday night, they are consumed with raising the money to feed this huge engine that they have built to be able to afford the television time, because television is like a great maw that just takes every resource you've got and sucks it out of an organization and says more and more and more. And I used to say that my vision of a televangelist hell was that a man built this marvelous machine for preaching the gospel. And the machine reaches out and grabs him and chains it to him, and he has to shovel coal into it for all eternity. Money, 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 because it has to have money. And the reason I bring it up is because I really feel that one of the reasons why a lot of preachers made this mistake last year was because they had to write fundraising letters, and therefore the Y2K thing was a danger on the horizon that they could warn about. It was something they could cry wolf about, and maybe generate a few more letters coming back with a few more checks in it, and thereby raise the money that they needed. I'm sorry. That is, I think, what has happened in many cases. They were doing it Not you could say for their own gain, but they don't look at it that way. They would look at it as being for their ministry and for the sake of the work that God has commissioned them to do and for their calling and for whatever it is they have to do. That's what they're out there doing. And then they say, and this is the other side of this coin, "Come, I'll fetch wine and we'll fill ourselves with strong drink. For tomorrow shall be as this day and much more abundant." Now, as I said, they use the Y2K thing, an alarm thing, to stir people up. But then again, here's the other side of the message. Things are going to get a lot better. Tomorrow shall be as this day and much more abundant. Now, which message is it that we want to listen to? Which message is it that we should be influenced by as Christians, as people who wait for their Lord, as people who are looking ahead and saying, what is God going to do? To be take a balanced point of view in all this, you can't afford to just be a pessimist. There is too much to be happy about. There's too much to be optimistic about. You can't just be a cockeyed optimist either, because there are very serious dangers out there lurking for you, for your family, for your children, and for the generation that's coming along after us now. You have got to be able to understand the events that take place. And I think what's important is you have to be able to understand them. It's one thing, for a preacher like me to get up and talk to you and tell you these things. But the problem with it is I could have other motives. I mean, I could be trying to raise money. I could be trying to do something over, I have my agenda that I'm trying to pursue. What's essential is that you somehow have got to be able to be well informed. You have got to have your conscience informed. You have got to have your intuition, the basic engine of your intuition, educated and with the right fuel in it, so that you can look in the Bible, so that the Bible will make sense to you, and you can judge by the things that you read there. It's so critical that you study the Bible. Isaiah 57, verse 1. And all this continues on seamlessly in the Hebrew. The righteous perishes. Nobody lays it to heart. Merciful men are taken away, and no one considers that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. So often people wonder about people who have died. They worry about the fact that people they know who have been dedicated, given their lives to the service of the church and to other people and unselfish people, in the end wind up with a painful cancer and die in agony later on in a hospital somewhere with that disease. And they really wonder why in the world this happens this way. And they don't seem to quite get their mind around the fact that every one of us is going out of this world one way or the other. We're only given so much time here. And a lot of how the time we are given here plays out depends on a lot of the things that we and people around us do. For the biggest thing that God has done is to give us freedom. And He has allowed us to run free in this world. And this world is a dangerous place, and bad things happen to people in this world. But to understand this, that God does pay attention to the righteous people. And there are times when He might have intervened and healed. There are times He might have saved their life. And when we ask ourselves, why did He not? Shouldn't we rather ask ourselves, did God perhaps allow this righteous person to die so that He is taken away from the evil that is to come? Because who knows what God has around the story, not what God has around the corner, but what the world and life has around the corner for this person. But there is a time. And there's a time to live and there's a time to die. He shall enter into peace. They shall rest in their beds, every one in his uprightness. But now draw near, you sons of the sorcerer. Now his Isaiah, I haven't really examined the pattern as carefully as I might, but the pattern is not really that evident. But he shifts back and forth in his point of view. It's almost like he's got a group of people and he speaks to one group of people for a little while. Then he turns to another group of people. Draw near, you sons of the sorceress, you seed of the adulterer and the whore. Against whom do you sport yourselves? Against whom are you making a wide mouth and drawing out a tongue? Aren't you children of transgressions? Aren't you the seed of lies? Inflaming yourselves with idols under every green tree, slaying the children in the valleys under the clefts of the rocks. In those times, children were often sacrificed to other gods. In the ancient world, children were not valued that highly, and infanticide was common. We went through a period of time in our history when children were considered precious. They were protected, they were valued, held in very high esteem. We seem to be cycling out of that now to a point to where children are not nearly as precious as they were, to where Well, what Senator Moynihan called infanticide is now the law of the land in this country. That what is called partial birth abortion, or I think dilation and curettage, is now legal in many venues around the country, and all the way up until the last day of pregnancy. And when you see that type of thing happening, you get a man like Daniel Patrick Moynihan who steps up and says, that is infanticide. That is something that would have been unthinkable a generation ago in this country. What is it that has made it thinkable? Where are these changes taking place inside of us? Now, we can spend all of our time, if we want to, worrying about our computers. Maybe we ought to worry about our heart, our mind, our values, and what our children are learning in school, and what kind of values. I mean, when we can come down to this at the point to where the sex education of the 1940s, all of which virtually was carried out by people in their teens, had better results than sex education in our generation carried out by apparently adults, one really wonders, what has happened here to our hearts and our minds? Among the smooth stones of the stream is your portion. They are your lot. What's he talking about? Things like crawfish, That's what your lot. You've poured out a drink offering. You've actually worshipped gods that look like crawdads. He said, you poured out drink offering. Shall I receive? You think I'm comforted by this? Upon a high and lofty mountain you have set your bed. Now he goes to the sexual analogy. You have everywhere you went to offer sacrifice. Behind the doors and the post you have set up remembrance. You have discovered yourself. That is, you've taken off your clothes to somebody else. And you've gone up. You made your bed really big because you're going to bring a lot of people into it. You made a covenant with them. You loved their bed where you saw it. And you went to the king with ointment and increased your perfumes and did send your messengers far off and debased yourself even unto hell. You are wearied in the greatness of your way. I mean, you have gone so far into this wickedness, this sexual wickedness, that you're actually yourself getting tired of it. And when I saw this program, this frontline program, and I saw the absolute incredible weariness in these teenagers over sex, to where a young teenage girl would use a very vulgar expression about that sex was awful. It was for the guys. That the girls get no pleasure out of it at all. He says you're wearied in this thing. It's huge. It just encompasses your life. And finally you've come to the place to where you're just tired of it anymore. And you wouldn't say, there's no hope here. You have found the life of your hand, therefore you weren't grieved. In other words, this is what way I'm going to live your life. And you haven't mourned, you haven't been sorry, you haven't tried to turn it around. And of whom have you been afraid or feared? That you have lied? Who are you afraid of? That you lied to me, God's saying. How could someone make you so afraid that you would lie? That would fear that you have lied and not remembered me or laid it to heart? Have I not held my peace even of old, and you didn't fear me? I will declare your righteousness and your works. They're not going to profit you a bit. All of your religious works. There's a funny thing about this, too. That very often the people who are engaged in some of the most corrupt sexual practices are actually hyper-religious and hyper-righteous in other parts of their lives. And God says, I'm going to declare your righteousness and your works, but they're not going to profit you. When you cried, let your companies deliver you. You're in trouble? Hey, call your own soldiers. But the wind shall carry them away, vanity shall take them. He that puts his trust in me shall possess the land and shall inherit my holy mountain. Now, if you ever mark your Bible, you might want to make a note right there. Because what he is talking about here, the terminology here, is when Jesus would have cited this in the New Testament, he would have said, you will inherit the kingdom of God. Because that's what he means when he says, my holy mountain. That is a synonym for the kingdom of God. And you find it quite often in the Old Testament. He shall say, cast you up, prepare the way, take up the stumbling block, get it out of the way of my people. For thus saith the high and lofty one that inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place, with him that is contrite and of a humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the spirit of the contrite ones. The word contrite in the original means crushed. Like you take it and put it in a pestle and just crush it all up. And I have a feeling that every one of you here knows what it is like to be crushed. That there have been times in your life when you have experienced this. And God said, I inhabit eternity. I am high and I am lifted up, and I live up there. with the one that is of a crushed, humble spirit, to revive the soul of the humble, to revive the heart of the crushed ones. For I will not contend forever, neither will I always be angry, because if I did that, the Spirit would fail before me, and all the life that I have made. So I can't afford to be angry forever, because if I were, all the life, all the souls, nothing would last. For the iniquity of his covetousness, I was mad, and I hid him. I then hid myself, and I was angry, and he went on perversely in the way of his heart. I have seen his ways. I'll heal him. I will lead him. I will restore comfort to him and his mourners. I create the fruit of the lips. Peace. Peace to him that is far off and to him that is near, saith the Lord, and I will heal him. But the wicked are like a troubled sea, when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. There is no peace, saith my God, to the wicked. You want to know something really interesting about that passage? What it says to me is that God is dispensing peace. That he is right there. I mean, he is saying peace to him that's way off and to him that is near. And by the way, far off and near are almost code words for Gentiles and Jews. There's for people who live away and people who are close, is what he's talking about. I'm dispensing peace to everyone. Now, what I read in this is not that God withholds peace from the wicked, but that the peace does the wicked no good at all. That the inability to receive peace, the inability to experience the peace of God, is because of us, not because of him. Because of the approach to life, because of our wickedness, because of our unwillingness to be of service, our unwillingness to humble ourselves, our unwillingness to go to the dust if we have to, we are not able to receive the peace that is being dispensed by the bucket load, by the car load, by the train load to God all the time. And the reason why the person who has committed the unpardonable sin cannot be forgiven is not because God can't forgive. It's because he can't turn. Because he won't turn. That the problem, the barrier between us and God, is not his anger. It's our inability to accept the peace that he extends. Cry aloud. Spare not. Lift up your voice like a trumpet and show my people their transgressions and the house of Jacob their sins. But you know what? God says they seek me daily. They delight to know my ways as though they were a nation that did righteousness. You would think, watching their religious devotions, watching them come up to the tabernacle or the temple, watching them go through all the sacrifices, all the stuff, they seek me daily. They delight to know my laws. It's as though they were a people who didn't forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask the ordinances of justice. They take delight in approaching to God. And they say, well, that being the case, why have we fasted and you don't see? How come we have done this, done without food, and you don't take any knowledge of it? Why is it that we have gone through all the religious ceremony, fasting, prayers, sacrifices, holy days, Sabbaths, and God, why is it that you don't hear us on this? He says, well, in the day of your fast, you find pleasure and exact all your labors. You fast for strife and debate. You want to make a religious argument out of this thing. He said, you smite with the fist of wickedness. I mean, you'll go through all these religious arguments and you go out and smack somebody in the face. Come and give me a break here. You shall not fast as you do this day to make your voice be heard on high. This isn't the way it's going to be. It's not a fast like this that I have chosen. It's not just a day for a man to afflict his soul and bow down his head like a bulrush and spread sackcloth and ashes under him. You're going to call this a fast? You're going to call this acceptable to God? Again and again throughout the Old Testament, you find this dissatisfaction, this rejection, actually outright rejection on God's part, of the religious ceremony of a people whose heart isn't right. Religious ceremony is fine as far as it goes. God even prescribed a lot of religious ceremony, and then he turns right around and said, I'm sorry, the religious ceremony I prescribed for you is pointless because of your heart. You're going to call this a fast, an acceptable day of the Lord? Isn't this the fast that I have chosen? That you loose the bands of wickedness, that you undo the heavy burdens, that you let the oppressed go free, and you break every yoke. It's that you give your bread to the hungry, that you bring the poor that are cast out to your house. When you see the naked, you cover him, and that you hide not yourself from your own flesh. Do you realize how close this is to Jesus' teachings? How course, that shouldn't be surprising. That he starts out by citing this prophecy, Ho, everyone that's thirsty, come to the waters and drink. And he proceeds on through. And you come to this, and Jesus, in that last parable of Matthew 25, he comes back, and the Son of Man comes back, and he separates the sheep from the goats. And he says to those on his right hand, enter the kingdom, prepared for my Father from the foundation of the earth, because I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was in prison, and you visited me. I was sick, and you came to me. And they said, well, Lord, when did we do that? Inasmuch as you did it to the least of these, my brethren, you have done it to me. In this context, he says, this is the fast that I have chosen, that you deal your bread to the hungry, bring the poor that are cast out to your house, when you see the naked that you cover him, and you don't hide yourself from your own flesh. Then shall your light bring forth as the morning. Your health will spring forth speedily. Your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. You will call, and the Lord will answer. Man, but it comes from the heart. It's got to be something that takes place on the inside of man. He shall say, here I am. If you will take away the midst of you the yoke, the putting forth of the accusing finger, the old pointing at people and giving them the salute. He said, take it away, the speaking vanity. If you'll draw out your soul to the hungry, your light will rise in obscurity, your darkness will be as the noonday, and the Lord shall guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and make fat your bones. You shall make it like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters don't fail. And they that be of you shall rebuild the old waste places. And this is where you suddenly realize that you may be in time someplace you didn't realize you were. You shall build up the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. Marvelous. If you will turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing as you please on my holy day, if you'll call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord an honorable, and shall honor him, not doing your own ways, not finding your own pleasure, not speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. We were looking for a balanced view, a realization that man, as we struggle along, there is still a very strong reservoir of good and goodwill in our society and around the world in general. And what you saw when you saw the celebrations of the year 2000 and the bonhomie, the goodwill that was there, it was all very real. At the same time, we mustn't be foolish and not realize the corruption that is there. And when we read the prophets, we must not just be pessimistic. We must not just look on the negative side of things. We must also realize they call upon man to repent, and they hold out promises to us of the kingdom of God, of a better life here and now, that we will call in our prayers and that God will answer us, and that if our heart is right before him, and if our actions toward one another and the way we treat one another and our day-to-day behavior is right and godly and according to his word, that we're going to begin to bear results and have fruit in our lives. There is so much here. There is this short passage here in Isaiah 59 that I think is worth remembering at all times. One thing you should know about these fasts and prayers and so forth you go through, the Lord's hand is not shortened that it can't save. God doesn't have short arms. His ear is not heavy that he cannot hear. God's not deaf. It's your iniquities that have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid his face from you, and he won't listen to you. The barrier is not on his side. It's on yours. Your hands are defiled with blood, your fingers with iniquity, your lips have spoken lies, your tongues have muttered perverseness. Nobody calls for justice, nobody pleads for truth. They trust in vanity and speak lies, they conceive mischief and bring forth iniquity. It's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? And yet, here, right alongside all this goodwill, exists the same kind of attitudes, and sometimes right in the same person. And this is a struggle that we live with all of our lives. Coming on down, though, to verse 20. And here's one of those things that makes you want to look toward the understanding this in an end-time context. The Redeemer shall come to Zion, to them that turn from transgression in Jacob. As for me, this is my covenant with them, saith the Lord. The Spirit that is upon you, and my words which I have put in your mouth, shall not depart out of your mouth, or out of the mouth of your seed, or your seed's seed, saith the Lord, from henceforth forevermore. The Redeemer shall come to Zion. It's suggestive of the return of Christ. And he says, then arise and shine, for your light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. You know, it's a funny thing. I think a lot of people read that, and they think that means I'm the resurrection of the dead, and I look out here and I see the glory of the Lord. It's not what it says. It says the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. And as John said, when we shall see him, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. The prophets have a tough message. They have a beautiful message. They have an encouraging message. They have a hard message. There is a question, I think, for any of us who've ever taken a hand to the Bible and ever talked to the world about the Bible, about God and God's actions, to be very careful to take a balanced view and never confuse pessimism with reality, and never confuse cockeyed optimism with the approach of prophecy either. For God is good, man can be, but we have a long way to go.